So Kyle was our last resident of the year, so had the delight of having to work on the exhibition at the same time as being in the residency. So we talked a lot, but you were so gracious about the whole thing. And you and Bonnie should talk. Bonnie was also in that residency time, who is here tonight. You studied at Virginia Commonwealth University in the Craft and Material Studies program, and let's just let you talk about your work. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Okay, so my work's kind of like starts in history and then moves forward. So a lot of my previous work comes from my family history and my family inheritance. So my great-grandfather emigrated from Ukraine in 1912 to New York, and when he got to New York with his sister, he was like 14, and he worked, and eventually he worked at a button factory. Eventually he came to own the button factory, and then my grandpa came into the picture, started working at the button factory, and then one of the stories is, they made buttons until one winter in New York, everyone was buying 2 coats for the first time. It's a big deal, okay? And except the button factories were actually losing money at the time because the style of coats just had 1 button. So my grandpa just was like, well, buttons are just earrings, right? So they started making earrings and buckles for shoes, and then eventually they started importing porcelain from the UK and applying ceramic decals to that. So a lot of my work to apply to the residency was made with decals left over from that and ceramics from the thrift store. But this work, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make my own kind of ceramics and make my own decals. And something else that I really like to draw from in my work is Jewish culture and the Yiddish language. A lot of Jewish culture has kind of been consumed by American culture and then reproduced in a way that you don't really know its cultural etymology, at face value. So for this work, I was inspired by a style of stand-up comedy that emerged from what's called the Borscht Belt, which is a string of resorts that cropped up in the 20s through the 60s, and towards the earlier time of that, Jews really weren't allowed to stay at resorts. So the Borscht Belt was really where all the Jews from New York were going, to vacation with their families, lots of food, but the primary forms of entertainment were jazz and stand-up comedy. And the stand-up comedy that actually developed in the Borscht Belt, there was Joan Rivers and Jerry Seinfeld actually started doing stand-up out there, and the style of humor is this very self-deprecating, almost like a celebration of trauma that is kind of indicative of the Jewish experience. So what I was kind of focusing on with my work was kind of integrating, my own life experience into the photography that I was turning into the ceramic decals. And the intersection of the Yiddish language is this term of you're either the schlemiel or the schlemazel. And so the schlemiel is the person who, you spill your soup at dinner, right? And the schlemazel is the person you get spilled on. So it's this very having fun at someone else's expense. But, when I was thinking about that term, I was like, okay, well, I'm both, right? In my life. So this photography is kind of just showcasing these moments of failure or spillages that are sad, but we move on, and it's kind of the humor. It's really about humor as a route for exercising your trauma. So I'll start with these because these are a little bit more legible. This is one of the last things that I made while at the residency. So I started with these, and these are kind of more collage, right? A little harder to decipher, but these are more at face value. So in the center we have pictures of my legs that I feel if you have an iPhone, you ever take a picture by accident and you're oh, that's my foot. And then this is just my foot in a mousetrap, and this is I felt a bump on the roof of my mouth. And so I like tried to like take a picture of it, like, and then like, I don't know, no vaping. This is just like some Alfredo sauce that like someone left. It's not mine. And so if we move this way, this is really like, this is the second version of this piece. I can't remember any of their names, but all of these images are pictures of my car insurance claims that I've made throughout time. There's only like 2 or 3. It's like not that many. It looks like a lot. But like this was the first, these were the first decals I got back, right? And so this piece is really what inspired kind of the wrinkly forms of the rest of the pieces, because I was kind of getting at like the crumpling of the car. Everyone's fine. Everyone was fine. It was very low speed. But yeah, so this one's just like car insurance claims, and then like this one, it's like hard to tell, but this is just like a mylar balloon of like a pug that I was just like shoved under a car, and I was like walking to like therapy or something, and it was just this dog like on its side, just like shoved under a car and like left. And then this is like my favorite one. But like you can like notice kind of hands in this one. So these are like my brother's hands, and this is my sister's hand. And this was like last time I visited her. She like has this like pharmacy on her nightstand of just like everything she takes like for her mental health, and so she dumped it out on the bed. I think my cousin was there too, and they were all sorting through it, and they were like, "Oh, well, I take this one too," and my sister's like, "Oh, I don't like that one anymore," and like it's just like that process of like figuring out, you know, what you really need to kind of be at your baseline, you know, not even really good, just okay. But yeah, these are kind of like the situations that I don't know, I just ended up focusing on for these. I think, yeah, that's what I have. Thank you for listening. Thank you guys.
Does anyone have a question for Kyle?
I do.
Yeah.
Is the light, like the fact that it is a light fixture, is that like significant to you? Does that tie back to the Jewish roots or anything like that? I'm very into light.
I think like it doesn't like go directly back to like Judaism.
Yeah.
Yet I think there is something there, because like Jews are like, we make a lot of like ritual objects, you know, in our life. And so in that way, this is kind of like a ritual of like exercising. And I think just like, you know, bringing light to something or making light of something, you know, is kind of like what I was getting at. Yeah.
Is that the reverse cam on your car?
This is like, not my car, but I was like in college. There's kind of like a skeleton back, like it was in Colorado. My friend was driving, and like I don't have a reverse cam, and like neither does she. And we were like going back, and she was like, "Wow!" And it was like it's just like a weird skeleton, you know, somewhere in Steamboat Springs, you know, that like kind of scared us. It was spooky. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Supporting emerging artists, just like artists in general, is like really incredible, right? Like, you know, anything that you could do, whether you're like getting Christmas presents or like, you know, showing up to something like this, really makes a big impact on, you know, anyone you know who's a working artist. So I don't know, I just encourage everyone to like really support your local artists like in any way you can. You know, we're just following the holiday season, so yeah, just really fortunate for this opportunity. Thank you so much.